Okay, so a lot of what Jessica said was true. This is more of a general lessons for portfolios, not necessarily design specific, because it's all about tailoring to what you're applying to. So with that being said, there is no one right way to do the portfolio. There's no magic sauce. It must look like this, follow this template, this size font, etc. That will just drive you crazy into a nut hole. What's really important is what you're communicating with your portfolio, not necessarily how you're communicating it. So I'll give you some tips of the trade from my experience, both making one and looking at them on a regular basis at work, but it's by no means a one solution. So why a portfolio? You send your resume around to every single company. It's like your own little personal ad, but it can only tell so much, and oftentimes is very much not showing your personality through, but rather, here's the list of things I've worked on. The portfolio is a way for you to be able to tell a little bit more about yourself and get the employer interested in you as a person, as well as you as a potential employee through some of the work that you have done. It allows you to highlight what you want to be seen as. You get to build your own little brand about, okay, here's the things you should associate with me, and here's how you can then guide your in-person interview so that you're talking about the things you want to, not necessarily all the surprises that somebody's going to come up with. You get to set the conversation. So, what the hell do I put in a portfolio? First thing that's important to know is, who are you making your portfolio for? Boston Dynamics, Fisher-Price, both require engineering, both require, user research, very different kind of work. So for Boston Dynamics, you may want to say, oh, here's a really cool Poe project or what I did in the robotics lab. Whereas Fisher-Price, it's more about, here's experience I have with, say, designing parts for molding or psychology of children. Very different things you want to highlight in your portfolio, and it's important that you actually do tailor your portfolio to different people. So one common problem I see a lot of is people do an online portfolio that has, your Oz capstone, your scope presentation, your mechatronics, everything all in one, and it kind of deludes the person who's looking at it. It's a lot more helpful if somebody can say, I'm interested in this person for this, and see a range of projects that fits that. And it's good to still have a few fun ones in there, but make sure you have the content that matches what you're looking for. So it's very important to know your audience, and feel free to reach out to the company you're applying to ahead of time and get to know them. Figure out what are they looking for. Some of this will be in the job description. Some might find out about conversation with an employer or maybe somebody else from Olin who's interviewed there even. Don't be afraid to ask, because it helps make your conversation with them richer, and you're doing them a favor by asking ahead of time. So even within a company, it can be a little different. Continuum's a design firm. When you guys think of that, it could probably mean a lot of different things. So just to tell you a little bit about what we do as an example. So understanding people and what they're trying to do, UOCD for you guys, is a big part of what makes Continuum special. We're a design firm that's very people-centric and need-centric. And this is great, but it's not all we do. It's just a foundation of everything. Because the other side of it is Continuum Advanced Systems, where Adam and I primarily work, where we're making all these ideas real. It's one thing to come up with a bunch of concepts, but if they don't go anywhere, you're not actually improving the people's lives who you're helping. So when we're looking for somebody in the Make It Real section, we're looking at the technical skills just as much, if not more, than, say, the UOCD skills. And it's important to think about, for example, in our case, which side of the company are you applying to, and how can you tailor it further? Another site is helping businesses innovate. So think entrepreneurship capstone, Babson, etc. It's the business plan side of things, and how can we take these innovations and actually implement them? So it takes a lot of different groups within our company in order to make an idea real. And when you're applying for one of these specific subsets, where we really want to see your depth in it. And it's great to see breadth and interest in the other areas, but what you'll really be evaluated in is, for example, are you a good mechanical engineer? Are you good at, CAD, testing, that whole process? So although it's great to see your UOCD project and your interest in that, I might not want to see the 10 different sculptures you did unless you're really passionate about it, even though they technically are design. So, what do you guys have to fill in these buckets? Well, you have lots of different classworks. These are just a few. I don't even know if they all still exist. But you can start to think where some of these might fit different buckets. For example, a class like UOCD or PDD or ADE might fit really well on that strategy side of things, going out into the field, understanding user needs, and turning them into concepts. Whereas classes like, say, CompArc, Scope depending on your project, PO, etc., fit a lot better to the engineering side of things. So think about where you kind of fit in these different buckets. And the big one, other than that, is internships or research, if you're going the more academic route. It's great to show stuff that you've done on your summer vacation, quote unquote, unless you're working at Pizza Hut, because it's stuff that other Olin students don't necessarily have. I was interviewing for a mechanical engineer position at Continuum a couple years ago, where we had 8 different Olin students and alumni come through in 1 week to interview. I heard about 6 different robotic tuna projects. They were all from 2 different teams. So it's great to have projects that help differentiate yourselves from other Olin students. Because it's one thing if you think about, we have this cool class where we build a robotic tuna fish and it's awesome, but what you don't know is you're competing against your peers in addition to other people. So think about differentiating yourself across other Olin students as well as other companies. So your portfolio is only as good as what you have done to prepare ahead of time. So you can't necessarily go back and recreate that freshman year bottle rocket and take photos of it and make graphs of it. You'll kill yourself if you do it. So document everything you're doing as you're going. I have a hard drive to this day that is just all of my Olin coursework, minus the few hard drive crashes I had throughout the time. And it was invaluable when I was going to making my portfolio, that and Michael Maloney's photo collection. Remain good friends with him, because you will never know what you want a photo of to talk about in the future. So, a little text heavy, but some just basic content do's and don'ts. 3 to 4 entries is good with the equivalent of 1 to 2 pages per. Granted, that depends on your format. You don't want to delude somebody with too much information, but still give a little bit of variety on what you're covering. You want to show a range of work, so I don't want to see 4 different robots. Unless I was a robot company, then I would. But at Continuum, we do our consultancy model. We work on lots of different projects. So maybe I want to see a robot you've built, but also an app you've developed or a playground that you built. Just different parts showing different skills. Highlight your strengths because you're interviewing. You want to look as best you can. Pick what you're good at and also what you can talk about. Because when somebody comes in with a portfolio, that is what we're going to be asking all the interview questions about. So have stuff that you're still remembering and can talk about and are refreshed. Not necessarily a project you worked on, 4 semesters ago that you kind of remember what the final product was, but not necessarily how you got there. That's only going to hurt you in the end. Have personality and display your character, what you like, and be passionate. The best employees we always find are those that are curious and passionate about something, so let that shine through. It doesn't need to be all numbers. In fact, please don't make it all numbers and text, but rather have a little bit of fun with it. Demonstrating a sense of clarity and consciousness. You definitely want consistent formatting across your portfolio so that you're not giving us a headache when we're reading it. It will make our lives much better. It's the equivalent of a resume with typos. Be prepared for detailed questions. As I was mentioning, we are going to dig into these portfolio questions. So say, I'm just talking from my experience, I had a robotic snake that I developed here at Olin that was in my portfolio. People were asking me, so what control system did you use for it? What servos did you use? Why did you select those servos as opposed to other servos? And the answer for us was honestly, they're the ones we had on supply at first. But have an answer to questions like those because you will be asked. Not necessarily what decision you made, but why you made it. And then show how you think through a project and make decisions. Your portfolio should not be marketing material in the sense of, here's the final product and here's all the reasons why it's awesome. What we care about is how you got there, not what it is. It could be a project that failed, and that's great, as long as you can show process as you're going through it and why it failed and what you learned from it. I'm caring about what tests did you run, what did you check, what hurdles did you run into that you expected, ones that you didn't expect. How did you get through them? And then, which gets into this next one, have a story of hurdles and what you did to overcome. Most common interview question you will be asked is, what's a time you failed or encountered a struggle and what did you do with it? We want to see how you handle those situations, because life isn't all hunky-dory where everything works. So be prepared for that. Don't include projects you don't remember. You will look like a fool in your interview. Include projects where it's, for example, scope, all under NDA, you can't talk about it. It just drives us crazy. Yes, you may really want to talk about your scope project, and that's something that's great for the resume. But it's not necessarily something for the portfolio because it's not a conversation piece. And it doesn't show what you've done, it just shows the problem you were presented. Don't claim someone else's work. This is especially really important for team projects, which you guys will have a lot of. Be very specific over what you did and what you didn't do. And you can show the entire group's final work or tidbits from other people, but say there's a graph that you didn't produce, attribute it to who produced it. That way when somebody's asking questions about it, you can honestly say, here's the basis of it, but that was not my role. Here was my role, let's talk about that. Also for the example of where we had 7 different Robo-Tuna people come in, there is one team where they all claimed the exact same part that they were a role in. You will be found out. And don't tell us about your summer at Pizza Hut. Keep it relevant. Keep it the things that are going to be interesting for us to ask about, relevant to the position. We did have somebody try that one, which is why it's up there. Okay, so now you know what you're going to include, hopefully. You have this basic idea of here's the projects I'm going to put in it. Now what? How do I tell the story? And for a portfolio, it's really important to tell the story of the project because that's what we're caring about. That's the process, and that's how we get sucked into it. So, solid understanding of the overall goal in the process is just as important as the final part. And there's many different ways to show it. This is just an excerpt from mine, and sorry, it's a little bit blurry here. Like I said, no one right way or wrong way to do it. It's just how I chose to. But being able to show, like, okay, here's where we started. We did a bunch of sketches and field research, and then, it went through all these processes. Showing the iterations is great because then you can show what you learned and what steps you took. The design process is not linear. You guys have had that probably slapped into you a few times by now. And it's important to show that and acknowledge that. By just showing the end project, you don't get all the parts that lead up to it, and that's where the meat really is of how you are a good designer, engineer, entrepreneur, etc. And it's different for different cases. So that was more of a user end. This was the more of the technical end of things. Sorry, once again, a little bit blurry. Where I was able to go through, okay, here's the technical decisions we made and why. Here's our next prototype iteration. We learned these mistakes, changed it here, why, etc. And once again, it gives your interviewer a chance to really ask those detailed questions and see that you're making mindful decisions. So a key part is, in all storytelling, even if you're just telling a story to your little brother, is to focus on the memorable points. What were the aha moments? What were the insights you gained from this test or experiment? Because those are the things that people will remember after you leave the room. Those are the things that people will want to ask you about. So, basic outline for storytelling, very generic, is set up with what is a problem or challenge you faced. Now, this problem could be selecting the right motor for this project, or it could be design something for photojournalists, which was my UOCD project. There's many different problems, but call it out at the beginning so we know what the scope of your project is. What is an aha moment? What are the human insights and opportunities that you identified as you were going through your project? The idea or solution, and then of course, how did you get there? It's really powerful if you have little tidbits of your work that you can reference. And this goes back to save copies of your work, including the process, not just the final report. If you have an FEA screenshot that you did, include it so that we can ask about it and see that yes, you can do FEAs. Why did you choose the settings that you did? And ask really good questions like that. Another big part, especially for the software people out there, is if you can have block diagrams of a program you wrote. What are the top level insights? I don't necessarily need to see every line of your code. Please don't. That's not right form for a portfolio. But if you can give me a block diagram that shows how you thought through it.
Actually, that's okay. I'll look at all your code.
Okay, Adam will look at all your code. I will sit back and get glazed over eyes, but he's the one who matters on that one. It's really good so that we can see how you think. It's also important to remember, at least in our case, you won't always be interviewed by people within your discipline. You will be for sure, but there will be other people as well. So you're going to have to be able to say, describe your robot to somebody who has an anthropology degree. Be ready to do it. That's a true challenge, and it really helps with your story. If you can think about those high levels, what are you trying to communicate and why? So, back to our favorite do's and don'ts. Tailor your message to your audience. Be relatable. Focus on the problem at hand. Headlines are really helpful. So you guys know if you look at say a journal article, probably you're going to look at the abstract, the pictures, and the captions. Portfolios are sometimes a lot like that. So if you have like almost tags on the top, this project is about mechatronics and actuation. This project is about, you know, understanding the user and sketching and industrial design. It helps us gain an idea of, okay, here's what I'm getting into on this page, here's what they're trying to highlight. Now let me see if I want to look deeper. Keep it very relatable to the audience and human-centered. Once again, this depends on knowing your audience. In Adam's case, relatable might mean a page of code. In the case of me, not so much. So knowing your audience and asking ahead is always a good idea. If in doubt, include a little bit of multiples.
Can you talk a little more about that, Liz? Because I think that's a great point. How does someone say to the person that's setting up their interview, what are you looking for in a portfolio? And is that really just what they say?
So it depends on the environment, in all honesty. I've had a lot of Olin students contact me ahead of time of interviewing at Continuum and ask me point blank, and I'm fine with that. Say you're going in cold, you don't know anybody there, I would recommend looking at their website and seeing what kind of projects they work on. Look heavy at the job description, and if you've already been contacted by the company, go ahead and ask them, like, what are the key skills or interests you are looking for in an applicant for this position? Because that's really all you need to know in order to start that first step. And as you learn more, you can always tailor it more. Portfolios aren't something that should be static. They should keep growing and changing, tailoring them as needed. Keep it a conversational tone to the much you can. Portfolio is all about showing your personality and your work, so make sure to keep both there. And talk about your collaboration. It's not just I did this, I did that, I did that. Like I said, make sure to attribute work correctly, but acknowledge your collaboration, because that's something really cool that you guys get to experience on a frequent basis and should be a selling point for what you do. Do not go into excruciating detail unless it's warranted. And this, once again, will depend on the position, but that's something we'll ask about more, and maybe you can have backup, a little appendix with you that we can reference if we need it. But when you're trying to keep it to 1 to 2 page max per project, you're not going to be able to fit on a semester or a year's worth of work to those pages. So being able to curate the story is really important. And then don't just tell a chronological process story. I don't want to necessarily see a timeline, because that leaves out the insights and things aren't always necessarily linear. Tell me a story that may start at the end and come back to the beginning. You may have a key insight you want to start at. Figure out what makes most sense for the story and skills you're trying to tell. So, just some thought starters here. I polled people around Continuum who deal with this on a regular basis, some from strategy group, some from the advanced systems group, etc., just seeing what pieces of advice they had for you guys. So, don't make spelling errors. You will get thrown out first round. Always get a proofread, and don't just proofread your own. Ask somebody else to look over it, because there will be things that you look over and over again, and assess might actually be written as asses. Yes, I have seen that. And although it will give us a good laugh, it does not necessarily help your professionalism points. It's not necessarily interesting if you worked on a cool project if your role itself wasn't really meaty. So don't look at what the final product was and how shiny and whiz-bang it is. Think about what you did, where you had the greatest influence, and where you did your best work. Those are the projects you want to share. Be very specific about your contribution. We've already hit on that one. Remember to keep samples of your work. Do not lie, ever. You think this is common sense. It does happen where you're walking down a point and somebody says, oh, that's really cool. Did you do blah, blah, blah? And you might want to say yes, but if you didn't, don't. It will only dig you into a big hole. Less can be more. This is all about the curation. You don't want to throw everything out at us. Pick what's the most memorable, most insightful, and the most meaty. That's what you want to include. Personality is great. So is professionalism. And it's important to show that balance. We don't necessarily want somebody to walk in and be like, hey man, this was the awesomest project because I love this, this, this. It's just going to get a little bit of an eye roll in the back. So finding that balance is great. Show what you're passionate about. Show your passion about it, but keep a level of professionalism as well. And most importantly, have fun. Because it's all about showing who you are, and if you're having a good time, your interviewers will too. So, we don't bite too hard. Feel free to reach out, and I am happy to answer questions if you guys have them. Just email is best. And if I don't reply, as Sally Wilds knows, it doesn't mean that I didn't mean to. It means it probably honestly fell off my plate, so follow up. But yeah, that's all I have. This is more meant to be an open discussion and collaboration session, so I'm going to turn it over to Dante right now, show what you have, and then we'll just open it up so that people can ask any questions back and forth.